Luna did not sleep that night. She had tried. She had pulled the blanket up to her chin, closed her eyes, and told herself that the unease sitting in her chest was nothing more than tiredness. But the unease did not agree. It stayed. It pressed. And by 2:30 in the morning, it had grown into something she could no longer ignore. She had been with Nathan for 4 years. 4 years of choosing him every single day, in ways that most people never saw and never would. She had stayed up with him through the nights he could not stop thinking about the job he had nearly lost. She had sat quietly beside him at his mother's funeral when every other person in his life had run out of words. She had rearranged her own schedule, her own ambitions, her own friendships, to make room for the shape of his life. And she had done all of it without keeping count, because that was simply who Luna was. She loved without measuring. She gave without waiting to be asked. To the people who knew them as a couple, they looked like something solid. Nathan was charming in public, attentive enough in private, and had a way of making Luna feel, on the good days, like she was the only person in any room. He was not a cruel man. That was what made everything so complicated. He was warm and he was funny, and he had a way of remembering small things that made her feel seen. The anniversary of the day they first had coffee together. The name of the teacher she had told him once, just once, had made her feel worthless in school. He remembered. He paid attention. And for a long time, Luna had taken that attention as proof of something deep. She had moved into his apartment 18 months ago. It had felt like a step forward. A declaration. She had given up her own place, the one she had worked hard to build into something that felt like hers, and she had carried her things across the city in 3 trips, her heart doing something hopeful the whole time. Nathan had made her feel wanted that day. He had helped her arrange her books on the shelf and had made dinner and had told her that the apartment felt more like a home with her in it. She had believed every word. What she did not know, and would not know until that night, was that Nathan had been carrying something separate. Something hidden behind the ordinary rhythms of their life together. He had kept it in a place she had never thought to look, because it had never occurred to her that a man who remembered small kindnesses could also be building something entirely other, somewhere she could not see. Luna was not a suspicious person. She had never gone through his phone. She had never questioned his late evenings or read anything alarming into the nights he said he was simply tired. She trusted him the way people trust the ground beneath their feet, not because they check it every morning, but because it has always been there. She worked as a graphic designer for a mid-sized agency in the city. She was good at her job. Her colleagues respected her. She had a natural eye for what worked and what did not, a patience for detail that made her difficult to replace. Outside of work, she painted sometimes, though she had done it less over the past year. She had a group of friends she did not see enough anymore. She had a younger sister, Kara, who called her every Sunday and who had, on more than one occasion, said things about Nathan that Luna had gently redirected. Not because Kara was wrong, but because Luna had not been ready to hear it. That was the honest truth of it. There were things she had not let herself see, not because she was foolish, but because she was human. Because she had invested so much of herself into something that she had quietly decided it must be worth it. People do that. They protect the thing they have built, even when the first cracks appear, even when the cold air starts to come through. Nathan sold commercial property. He was good at it. He earned well and he dressed well and he had a social ease that made people warm to him quickly. He had friends from university who still gathered regularly, loud evenings at restaurants where wine flowed and laughter came easily. Luna had gone with him to those gatherings many times. She had smiled and contributed and genuinely liked several of the people there. She had thought of those evenings as part of their shared life. What she did not know was that one of those friends, a woman named Claire, had been present in Nathan's life in a way that existed entirely outside the borders of what Luna could see. Not in the same city. Not someone Luna had ever met. A woman in another place, reached by phone calls and messages and carefully timed absences, a woman who had apparently been told things. Important things. The kind of things a man says when he means to keep a promise. Luna did not know any of this yet. On that night, a Thursday in late autumn, Nathan had gone to bed before her. She had stayed up a little longer, finishing something for work on her laptop, a logo revision that had been frustrating her all week. She had finally cracked it, felt the small satisfaction of work coming together, and had closed the laptop just before midnight. She had brushed her teeth, turned off the lights, and slid into bed beside him. He had stirred slightly, murmured something, and gone quiet again. She lay in the dark and watched the ceiling. The apartment made its usual sounds. The refrigerator. The occasional car outside. The soft, familiar breathing of the man beside her. She tried to let the tiredness pull her under. It would not. Something in her body was awake in a way she could not explain. A low-level alertness, like standing in a room and sensing that something in it has moved, even though everything appears to be exactly where it should be. She turned onto her side. She turned back. She thought about the logo. She thought about Kara, who had texted that afternoon and whose message she had not yet answered. She thought about nothing in particular, the way the mind moves at night when sleep refuses to come. And then she heard it. Nathan's voice. Low. Coming from the other side of the bedroom door, which she now realized was slightly open. He had gotten up. She had not noticed. He was in the hallway, or perhaps the kitchen, and he was speaking quietly, with the specific quietness of a person who does not want to be heard. Luna did not move immediately. She lay still and told herself it was nothing. A friend in a different time zone. A work call that could not wait. People got calls at strange hours. There were reasonable explanations. She had a whole list of them prepared without realizing it, the way the mind protects itself from what it already suspects. But she kept listening. And the reasonable explanations began, one by one, to dissolve. It was not what he said first that reached her. It was the tone. She had been with this man for 4 years. She knew his voice the way you know a piece of music you have heard so many times that you can feel the next note before it arrives. And the voice she was hearing now carried something she had not heard him direct at her in a long time. Something unhurried and warm and almost tender. The voice of a man who feels completely safe with the person on the other end of the line. Luna sat up slowly. The room was dark. Nathan was still in the hallway. She sat on the edge of the bed and she listened, and the words began to arrive with a clarity that felt almost cruel. He said a name. The name was Claire. He said it softly, the way you say a name when it means something to you. Then he said other things. He talked about plans. He talked about timing. He used the word soon more than once, and each time he said it, Luna felt something in her chest respond like a string being pulled. He said he was working things out. He said that it would not be much longer. He said he wanted to do things properly. He said her name again, and this time he said something else alongside it, something that removed every last reasonable explanation Luna had been holding on to. He said he wanted to build a life with her. Luna sat in the dark bedroom of the apartment she shared with this man, and she did not make a sound. She did not cry. She did not reach for her phone. She did not move to the door. She simply sat there, and she let the words come through the wall, and she let them mean exactly what they meant, and she did not try to soften them or reframe them or find an alternative reading. He wanted to build a life with someone named Claire. He was already living with Luna. She understood everything at once, the way understanding sometimes arrives not gradually but in a single, quiet collapse, like a building that stands and then does not. For years of mornings. For years of meals and silences and arguments that ended in apologies and the slow ordinary intimacy of two people who share a life. All of it was still true. And none of it was the whole truth. There was something else, something that had been running alongside everything she knew, hidden just beneath the surface, close enough to touch if she had only looked down. She sat with that for a long time. The voice in the hallway continued, but she had stopped processing individual words. She was somewhere else now, in a place that was very still and very clear, the way the air gets after rain when everything has been washed clean and the world looks sharp and new and different from before. At some point, Nathan's voice stopped. There was the soft sound of footsteps returning. Luna lay back down. She closed her eyes. She slowed her breathing. She heard him ease back into the bed beside her. He settled. His breathing changed within minutes, back into the low rhythm of sleep, as if nothing had happened. As if the world were exactly the same as it had been an hour ago. Luna lay in the dark and looked at the ceiling and did not sleep for the rest of the night. And somewhere in those hours, without drama and without announcement, something in her shifted. Not broke. Shifted. Like a compass finding north after a long time of spinning. She knew what she was going to do. She knew it the way she had always known her best decisions, not through argument or deliberation, but through the kind of deep, cellular certainty that arrives when a person finally stops running from the truth. She was not going to make a scene. She was not going to confront him in the dark. She was not going to cry until he offered an explanation that made it easier for her to stay. She had done hard things quietly her whole life. She could do this one too. She was going to leave. And she was going to leave before he woke up. It started the moment Nathan's breathing deepened back into sleep. Luna did not allow herself to hesitate. Hesitation was the enemy of what she needed to do. She knew herself well enough to understand that if she stopped and thought too long, she would find reasons to wait. She would talk herself into one more conversation, one more chance, one more morning. She had given him enough mornings. She did not have any more to spare. She moved in the dark with a precision that surprised her. Her eyes adjusted quickly. She knew the apartment the way she knew her own hands. She had lived in it for 18 months and she had cleaned every corner of it and she had rearranged it twice and she had put her fingerprints on almost every surface. She knew exactly where everything was. The first thing she did was find her bag. The larger one. The soft-sided one she used for weekend trips, which lived on the top shelf of the wardrobe. She lifted it down slowly, carefully, one hand on the strap and the other steadying it against the shelf so it would not knock anything. Nathan did not stir. His breathing stayed low and even. She began with the things that were entirely, irreplaceably hers. There was a small leather journal on the nightstand, the one with the dark green cover that she had been writing in for over 2 years. She picked it up and placed it at the bottom of the bag. Then there was the necklace in the drawer, the thin gold one with the small oval pendant that had belonged to her grandmother, a woman named Edith, who had pressed it into Luna's hand at 16 and told her to wear it on the days she needed reminding of who she came from. Luna had worn it often in the early years. She had worn it less recently. She found it now and held it for a moment in her palm, feeling its weight, and then placed it carefully in the inside pocket of the bag. She moved to the bathroom. She took her specific things. The moisturizer she had bought herself. Her medication. The hair oil that she ordered from a small online shop and that Nathan had once knocked off the shelf and picked up without comment. She took what was hers and she left what was not. She was not taking anything that did not belong entirely to her. That mattered to her. She would not give him anything to call her on. She would leave without any accusation he could redirect at her. She dressed in the dark. Black trousers, a thick jumper, her ankle boots. She moved slowly, sitting on the edge of the bath to pull on the boots so as not to make any sound on the bedroom floor. Her hands were steady. She noticed that. She had expected them to shake, and they did not. Her hands had apparently decided that they were done with uncertainty. They moved with the confidence of someone who has made up her mind. Back in the bedroom, she stood for a moment and looked at Nathan. It was still dark, but her eyes had fully adjusted, and she could see the shape of him under the blanket. His shoulder. The side of his face. He looked peaceful. He looked entirely undisturbed. And Luna stood there and felt something move through her that was not hatred and was not even anger exactly, though anger was somewhere in it. It was more like recognition. The recognition of a truth she should have let herself see earlier, and the strange, exhausted relief that she was finally seeing it now. She did not hate him. She did not want to. Hate required continued investment, and she was withdrawing all of it. She picked up her bag and walked to the living room. There were more of her things here. A framed print she had bought at a street market 2 years ago, a small watercolor of a harbor in pale blues and grays. She considered it. It was hers. But it was also heavy and large, and this was not the time for frames. She left it on the wall. She would let it stay. Let it be the one thing he could look at and know she had been there. On the bookshelf, there were 3 books with her name written inside the cover in her own handwriting. She had done that as a teenager and never quite stopped. She took those 3 and slid them into the bag. She left the rest. She left the blanket she had bought for the sofa, the small ceramic dish by the front door where they both dropped their keys. She left the succulent on the windowsill that she had been quietly keeping alive for 7 months. She left almost everything, because she was not trying to strip the place. She was trying to leave. She sat down at the kitchen table for a few minutes. Not because she was wavering. Because she was human and she needed a moment to simply breathe and be still before she walked out of a life she had spent 4 years building. She looked at the kitchen she knew so well. The coffee machine Nathan used every morning. The bowl of fruit she replenished every week without being asked. The calendar on the wall, with her handwriting on it, appointments and reminders and a small star on the date of an event they had planned for the following month. She looked at the star for a moment. Then she looked away. She took her keys from the ceramic dish by the front door. Only hers. She put his on the kitchen counter. Quietly. Without ceremony. She picked up her bag and she put on her coat and she stood at the front door of the apartment that had been her home, and she did not allow herself the dramatic pause she had seen in films. She did not take one last long look around. She simply opened the door, stepped out into the corridor, and pulled it closed behind her with the lightest possible click. The corridor was empty. The building was asleep. The lift doors opened silently when she pressed the button, and she rode it down alone, standing in the small mirrored box with her bag and her coat and the quiet that surrounded her like something she had chosen. Outside, the city was dark and cold and barely moving. There were a few lights on in distant windows. A car moved slowly down a side street. The air was sharp and clean and it hit her face when she pushed through the main door, and she stood on the pavement for just a second and breathed it in. Cold air. The smell of the city before it woke up. The particular silence of hours that belonged to almost no one. She had sent a message before leaving. Just one. To her friend Diane, who lived 20 minutes away and who had known Luna since university and who picked up the phone at strange hours without complaint. The message was short. It said, "I'm leaving his place now. Can I come to you?" Diane had replied within 2 minutes with a single word and an address she already knew by heart. The word was, yes. Luna started walking. She did not call a car immediately. She wanted to walk for a few minutes, to feel the ground under her feet and the cold air on her face and the reality of what she had just done. The streets were quiet. A man walked a dog in the far distance. A cafe was beginning to light up, its inside warmth visible through the glass, a single person moving behind the counter preparing for the morning. The world was waking up slowly, carefully, and Luna was already in it, moving through it, carrying only what was truly hers. She was not fine. She knew that. What she had heard through that wall had done something to the inside of her that would take time to understand fully. There would be days ahead that would be hard in ways she could not yet predict. There would be moments when the grief would arrive and ask to be felt, and she would have to let it in. She was not pretending otherwise. But she was also not broken. She was standing. She was walking. She had done the thing that needed to be done, and she had done it with more dignity than most people would have managed, and she was not going to apologize for any part of that. She called a car at the end of the street. While she waited, she stood under a lamppost and looked up at the sky. It was still dark, but the very edges of the horizon had begun to shift, barely, just the faintest suggestion of the morning that was coming. She watched it for a moment. Then the car arrived, and she got in, and she did not look back at the building behind her. Nathan woke at 7:15 on a Friday morning to a bed that was half empty and a silence in the apartment that he registered before he had even fully opened his eyes. There was something about the quality of the silence that was different. He noticed it the way you notice when a sound you have grown accustomed to has stopped. Not absence exactly. Something more specific than that. A changed texture to the morning. He reached across the bed and touched her side. Cold. Not the kind of cold that comes from someone slipping out 5 minutes ago. The kind that had settled. He got up and checked the bathroom. Empty. The living room. Empty. He noticed the kitchen counter before he noticed anything else, specifically the single key sitting on it, the one she always dropped in the ceramic dish by the front door on the way in. The dish was still there. His key was in it. Hers was on the counter. Separate. Deliberate. Placed with the precision of someone who had thought very carefully about exactly where to put it. He stood and looked at that key for a long time. Then he checked the wardrobe. There were gaps now, small ones, where things had been. Not obvious to anyone who had not known exactly what was there before. But Nathan had shared a wardrobe with Luna for 18 months. He knew. He could see the negative space where her green weekend bag had been, the absent hangers, the missing small box she kept on the upper shelf. He stood in front of the wardrobe and he looked at the gaps and he understood in the most concrete possible way that she was not coming back this morning. He reached for his phone and called her. It rang 7 times and went to voicemail. Her voice, recorded months ago, calm and clear, asking him to leave a message. He stood in the kitchen holding the phone after it went to silence and he had not left a message. He did not have the words for a message. He could not think clearly enough to decide what the first sentence would even be. He made coffee. He did not know why. His hands did it automatically, reached for the machine, measured the grounds, pressed the button. While the machine worked, he stood at the kitchen window and looked at the street below and tried to put together what had happened. He told himself that she might have simply left early. For work. That he was constructing something out of nothing. But the key on the counter argued with every version of that story. Luna did not leave her key on the counter when she went to work. Luna did not take her weekend bag to work. Luna did not leave without saying anything, not once in 4 years had she left in the night without a word. He called again. Voicemail. He sat down with his coffee and thought about the phone call. The one the previous night. He had woken up around 2 in the morning, unable to sleep, and had taken his phone to the hallway. He had been careful. He had been quiet. He had been as sure as a person could be that Luna was asleep, that the bedroom door had been mostly closed, that the distance and the low volume of his voice had been enough. He had thought he had managed it carefully. Now he sat at the kitchen table and the possibility that he had been wrong about that settled over him like something cold and heavy. He tried to calculate it. How much could she have heard? What had he said? The conversation had been short by the standards of most of his calls, but it had been specific. He had been specific, because Claire had asked him to be and because he had wanted to be. He had said things he had not yet said in quite that way before. He had said them because it was 2 in the morning and he had thought he was alone. He put the coffee mug down on the table and held his head in his hands. He had not intended for any of this to happen this way. He had, in the way that people who are living dishonestly very often do, told himself for a long time that he was managing things. That he was not a bad person, merely someone in a complicated situation who needed time to work out the correct path forward. He had told himself that he cared about Luna deeply, which was true. He had told himself that he had not meant to allow things with Claire to develop the way they had, which was also, in its own limited way, true. He had told himself many things that were each individually defensible and that together added up to a life he had been living without honesty. He sat at the kitchen table in the silence of an apartment that still smelled like both of them, and for the first time he was not managing anything. The situation had resolved itself without his input. Luna had taken that out of his hands completely, and the feeling that produced in him was not the relief of a man who had secretly wanted to be found out. It was something more uncomfortable than that. It was the feeling of a man confronting, in a kitchen at 7:30 in the morning, who he had actually been for the last year or more. He called once more. She did not answer. Meanwhile, Luna was sitting in Diane's small living room, wrapped in a blanket that smelled of washing powder and a faint trace of the candle that Diane lit in the evenings. Diane had made tea without asking, had placed the mug on the coffee table, and had sat down across from Luna with the particular kind of presence that only a person who truly loves you can offer, quiet, close, not asking for the story before Luna was ready to give it. Luna had told her. Not everything. The essential shape of it. She had said what she had heard, and she had said what she had done, and she had said it in a steady voice that had surprised even her. Diane had listened without interrupting. When Luna finished, Diane had said, quietly, that she was proud of her. Not for the decision itself, though she thought it was the right one. But for the way she had made it. For the clarity of it. Luna had pressed her lips together and nodded. She did not quite trust herself to speak for a moment. Then she had picked up the tea and held it with both hands and let the warmth of it come through the mug into her palms, and she had sat with Diane in the quiet of the early morning while the light came up slowly outside the window. There was a grief in her that she could feel beginning to move. She was not going to pretend it was not there. It was enormous. For years was not a small thing. The apartment had not been a small thing. The future she had imagined was not a small thing. All of it was going to need to be grieved properly, at the right time, and she understood that the right time was not this morning, not yet. This morning she needed to stay in this room and drink this tea and breathe. But the grief was there. She could feel it the way you feel weather coming. Something large moving toward you over a long flat plain, something you cannot stop, only wait for. She was not afraid of it. She had been through hard things before. She would go through this one too. What she was also feeling, below the grief, underneath it, was something she had not expected. Something lighter. A kind of space that had not been there before. She had carried something without knowing she was carrying it. The weight of the not quite right. The low-level tension of a relationship that she had been holding together largely through her own effort. She had not named it while she was in it. She was naming it now, from the outside, and it was startling to recognize how heavy it had been. She was tired. But it was a different tiredness than she had felt going to bed the previous night. It was a tiredness she could rest inside of. An honest exhaustion, without any of the unease that had kept her awake. Diane brought more tea and a plate of toast and sat back down, and they talked in the slow, easy way of old friends who have been through enough together that no pretending is required. Diane did not say anything unkind about Nathan. She did not need to. Luna was not looking for a chorus of agreement. She was not looking to be told she had been wronged. She already knew the shape of what had happened. She did not need it enlarged or dramatized. She needed to begin thinking about what came next. Her phone had lit up twice while she sat with Diane. Both times, the name on the screen was Nathan's. She had looked at it and she had not answered, and each time she had set it face down again without speaking. She was not ready to have that conversation. She was not sure when she would be ready, or if ready was even the right frame. There were things that would need to be handled practically. The apartment, the things she had not taken, the formal ending of what they had been. Those things would require some form of communication eventually. But not now. Not this morning. This morning, the most important thing she could do was to stay exactly where she was and let the dust settle and remind herself, gently and without cruelty, that she had not caused this. She had loved someone well and honestly, and the failing had not been in the quality of her love. She looked at Diane and said, slowly, that she had left the painting on the wall. The watercolor. The pale harbor. She said she didn't know why. Maybe because it was too big to carry. Maybe because some part of her had wanted to leave one thing behind that was beautiful and that was hers, so that he would have to live with the evidence of who had been there. Diane smiled at that. She said it sounded exactly like something Luna would do. And for the first time since the middle of the previous night, Luna almost smiled too. 3 weeks after she walked out of Nathan's apartment, Luna was living in Diane's spare room, sleeping on a narrow bed under a window that faced a small garden, waking each morning to the sound of birds and the particular quality of light that comes through curtains that are not your own. She had not found a new place yet. She was not rushing. For the first time in a long time, she was not trying to arrive anywhere. She had spoken to Nathan once. He had called on the 5th day, and she had answered because the practical matters could not be indefinitely delayed and because she had decided, calmly and without drama, that she was capable of a single necessary conversation without it destroying her. He had been sorry. He had said it multiple times, and she had let the words exist without responding to them the way he probably hoped she would. She was not interested in the apology as a door that she was expected to open. She was interested only in the specific practical questions, the things she had left in the apartment, the few arrangements that required unwinding. They had talked through those things with a kind of careful politeness that was almost formal, and then she had said she needed to go, and she had ended the call. She did not feel triumphant after that call. She did not feel particularly powerful. She felt tired in the way of someone who has done a hard thing and is now on the other side of it, looking back at the distance crossed. She made herself a cup of tea and sat in the garden for 20 minutes, and the birds did what they always did, indifferent to everything, and she found that enormously comforting. She had started painting again. Diane had found a small folding table in a storage cupboard and set it up in the spare room without being asked, and Luna had gone to the art shop 2 streets over and come back with a few things, nothing expensive, just enough to have something to put on paper. She sat with it in the evenings, after dinner, while Diane read on the sofa in the next room with the television on low. Luna painted slow things. Color washes. Shapes that were not quite anything. She was not trying to produce work. She was trying to remember what it felt like to do something for no other reason than that it pleased her. Kara had come to see her on the 2nd weekend. She had arrived with food and with a remarkable restraint, because Kara's first instinct in a crisis was to be vocal and thorough, but she seemed to understand that her sister did not need that right now. They had gone for a long walk and talked about many things, some of which were about Nathan and some of which were not. Kara had held her hand for part of the walk, which she had not done since they were children, and Luna had let her. She had not cried in front of anyone yet. She had cried alone, in the narrow bed under the window, in the private hours of 2 nights she would not fully account for. It had not been the loud, consuming grief she had expected. It had been quieter than that. More like something releasing than something breaking. She had cried and then she had lain in the dark and breathed slowly, and at some point she had slept, and in the morning she had been still standing, which was exactly what she needed to confirm. Her colleagues at work had noticed that something had changed, in the way that people who spend many hours together in a shared space always eventually notice, but most of them had the grace not to ask directly. Her closest colleague at the agency, a woman named Sophie who had worked alongside her for 3 years, had simply placed a coffee on her desk one morning with a look that asked nothing and offered everything. Luna had accepted it and said thank you and got on with her work, and that was one of the small kindnesses she would not forget. She had thought, in those weeks, about the other woman. Claire. The one whose name had come through the wall at 2 in the morning like something thrown. She had thought about her carefully and without bitterness, which had surprised her. She did not know this woman. This woman may not have known about Luna in any complete way. People in these situations often did not know the full picture, because the full picture was precisely what was being hidden from them. Luna did not have access to Claire's knowledge or intentions or the version of events she had been given. She could not be angry at the outline of a person. She could only feel, with a low and genuine sadness, that Claire was inheriting something she probably thought was the whole story, and that the whole story, as Luna now knew, had never been available to anyone but Nathan. She hoped, with a simplicity that surprised her, that Claire would eventually have access to the truth. Not through Luna. That was not her responsibility. But through time, through the ordinary accumulation of lived experience, through the moments that reveal what a person is made of when they think they are not being observed. Luna had learned what Nathan was made of through a wall at 2 in the morning. She suspected Claire would learn it through some other opening, in some other quiet hour, and that when she did, she would understand something she had not understood before. Luna did not contact her. She had no interest in doing so. That chapter was closed. What she was focused on now, with the particular concentration of someone who has had a significant thing removed from their life and is beginning to see what was always underneath it, was the question of herself. Who she was when she was not organizing her days around the rhythms of someone else's needs. What she actually wanted, not from a relationship or a future imagined alongside another person, but from the plain fact of her own life, the hours of it, the texture of it, the way she wanted to move through the world. She had let some things go. Not deliberately, but gradually, the way things do when you are not paying attention. The painting, she was taking back. That had started on the third evening and had not stopped. The friends she had allowed to drift, specifically a group she had known since college who met occasionally for meals and whose messages she had too often left unanswered in recent years, she had started responding. She had accepted an invitation to a dinner that was happening the following week, and she had felt, when she clicked to confirm, something very like genuine anticipation. She had started walking in the mornings. Not for exercise, not as a program or a plan, but simply because walking felt good and because the city in the early hours had a quality she appreciated, a sharpness to it, a realness. She had found a route she liked, through a small park and along a canal and back through streets that were busy by midday but quiet at 7. She did it most mornings now, even the cold ones, especially the cold ones, because the cold air was bracing and honest and it woke her up in a way that felt clean. She was beginning to understand something she had circled without quite landing on for most of her adult life, which was that the quality of her life would ultimately be determined not by the people she shared it with but by what she brought to it herself. She had brought a great deal to the relationship with Nathan. She had not been bringing as much to herself. That was going to change. Not dramatically, not with announcements or declarations. Just quietly, practically, day by day, in the small choices that accumulate into a life. One morning, about 3 weeks in, she woke early and lay in the narrow bed and watched the light come through the curtains and felt something she had not felt in so long that she had to think for a moment before she could name it. It was not happiness exactly, not yet, not entirely. It was something older and quieter than happiness. It was the feeling of being in her own life. Fully. Without a corner of herself reserved for the management of someone else's needs or expectations. Just her own breath, her own thoughts, the birds outside, the morning. She lay with it for a while and did not rush to get up. She just stayed in it. Let it be exactly what it was. She would find a new apartment eventually. She had already spoken to an estate agent. She was thinking about somewhere a little further east, a neighborhood she liked, near a market she had visited once and found charming. She was thinking about a place with a good window, something north-facing, the kind of light that was consistent and honest and good for painting. She had not looked for another relationship and she was not looking. That part of her life would sort itself out in its own time, or it would not, and either way she was not organizing her decisions around it. She had learned something about herself in this. She had learned that she was capable of choosing herself under the most difficult possible conditions, in the dark, quietly, without an audience, without being asked. She had learned that her own judgment, when she actually listened to it, was reliable. She had spent 4 years talking herself out of the things she sensed. She was not going to do that again. There was one afternoon, about a month after she had left, when she passed the street where Nathan's building was. She had not planned it. It was a route she ended up on by coincidence, or something that felt like coincidence, on a day when she had been walking without a particular destination in mind. She had seen the building from the end of the street. The blue door. The second-floor window of the apartment, curtains closed against the afternoon light. She had looked at it for a moment. Then she had continued walking. She did not feel what she had expected to feel. She did not feel nothing, because she was not made of nothing. But what she felt was more like distance than pain. The particular distance that forms when you have moved far enough from something that you can finally see its actual size. It was not as large, from here, as it had felt from inside it. She walked on. The street curved and the building disappeared behind her, and she turned her attention forward, to the road ahead, to the afternoon light that was doing something lovely on the wet pavement, reflecting the sky in small, perfect pieces. She had a dinner to get to. She had a canvas waiting at home. She had a morning walk planned for tomorrow and a phone call with Kara on Sunday and a Monday at work where something new was waiting to be solved and she was good at solving things. She pulled her coat tighter and walked, and the city moved around her, and she was in it, present and unhurried, a woman who had done the hardest thing quietly and was now, carefully and without fanfare, building something that was only and entirely hers. She did not look back. There was nothing back there she had not already understood. Everything that mattered was here, in this street, in this afternoon, in the forward direction she had chosen in the dark hours before dawn, when she had picked up her bag and her keys and her life, and walked through a door she would never need to reopen.